My mom doesn't need that old thing anymore. I already sold it. My son says it like it's a favor. His voice is loud, casual, like we're discussing leftovers. But we're not. We're standing in my garage, and that old thing is the last car my husband ever touched. I don't say a word. I don't even blink. The light above us flickers. Dust dances in the air like ghosts. My daughter-in-law scrolls on her phone by the door, pretending not to listen. He is my only child, 34 years old, and right now he's grinning. Just needs a quick signature, Mum. It's already gone. I glance at the empty parking spot. The silence feels heavier than grief. What he doesn't know is that before my husband passed, he left me something he never told anyone else about. Something I tucked away inside that car, specifically in the glove box. And now it's gone. I walk back into the kitchen without saying a word. My son follows behind me, still talking, still assuming I'll just nod and agree, like I always do, like I always have. The kettle whistles. I turn it off, pour water into 2 mugs, even though he won't stay long enough to drink it. It's just habit, the kind of thing a mother does even after her child forgets how to love her gently. He leans against the counter, arms folded. The guy who bought it seemed nice. Said he was giving it to his daughter for graduation. I stir sugar into my tea slowly. He doesn't ask if I'm okay. He doesn't ask if I wanted to say goodbye to the car. He doesn't even ask if I'm sure. Because he already knows the answer. He knows I'm not sure. He knows I would have said no. But he also knows that I don't raise my voice. I don't scream. I don't fight. That's how I've always been, especially since the funeral. It's been 7 months. 7 months since Michael. My husband of 41 years passed quietly in the hospital bed we rented for the living room. 7 months since I stopped being a wife and became something else. My son thinks that something else is less. I finish my tea in silence. He keeps talking something about paperwork and taxes, but I'm not listening anymore. I'm thinking about what was in the glove box, a black envelope, thick, heavy. Michael gave it to me the week before he died. He didn't tell our son. He didn't want to. It's not for him, he said. Not now. Maybe not ever. Inside the envelope, a notarized letter from his lawyer, copies of deeds, and a sealed safety deposit box key 1 I never used. Michael said it was everything we never said out loud, everything we saved, everything we built in case I ever needed to disappear or rebuild. And now it's with a stranger. Unless the man who bought the car never looked. Unless it's still there. I look up at my son. Do you have the buyer's name? He blinks, caught off guard. Why, I just do. He shrugs. I don't know. It's in the paperwork. Why, I rinse out the mugs. My hands are steady. No reason. But in my heart, something is already shifting, something sharp and clear. I'm not angry. Not yet. I'm just awake. I wasn't always invisible. There was a time when my voice meant something in this family. A time when the dinner table felt warm, when my opinions were asked, when I could still picture my son as a boy running barefoot through the backyard, not the man who stood in front of me last month, and said flatly, "I sold your car," as if it was a lawnmower, as if it hadn't carried the weight of 3 decades of memories. But to understand that moment, you'd have to understand what came before it. I married young. Not because I was naive, though I was in many ways, but because I believed in partnership. My husband was older than me, quiet, steady, reliable. He worked with his hands and believed in small things done well, freshly painted fences, tools cleaned and hung after every use showing up on time. He wasn't a man of grand gestures, but every morning he'd leave a folded napkin with a scribbled message under my teacup. That was his poetry. We didn't have much when we started. The car he gave me, the one my son just sold, was a used sedan with a dent in the back and a stubborn passenger window. But it was mine. He surprised me with it the day I got my nursing license. I can still hear his voice. You deserve to go to work in your own car, not wait for the bus. It wasn't about the vehicle. It was about who he believed I was becoming. We built our life piece by piece. He worked overtime. I worked night shifts. We raised our son with hands that were always a little tired but never unwilling. Birthdays were homemade cakes and paper streamers. Christmas was a tree we cut down ourselves and lights that flickered in the hallway while we drank cocoa from chipped mugs. I don't remember when it changed. Not exactly. But there's a silence that grows in a house even when no one's fighting. A slow drift. My son got into college the first in our family. He moved away, found different air, different friends, different rhythm. When he came home, he wore button-down shirts and corrected the way I said certain words. He'd sigh if I asked too many questions about his life. He loved me. I know he did. But I also think he began to feel ashamed of what we were, of what I was. My husband never said anything. He was proud of our boy, but I could feel the ache in his shoulders when our son visited less and less. Still, we never complained. We just waited. Parents do that. The shift became sharper when my husband got sick. The house felt colder, smaller. I took care of everything: meds appointments, meals, insurance calls. My son came home a few times, but always with an excuse to leave early. Work deadline, important pitch flights, cheaper today than tomorrow. I'd pack him sandwiches for the road, watch his car pull away, and pretend I wasn't crying in the doorway. When my husband passed, the silence in the house wasn't just emotional, it was physical. It echoed. There were days I'd forget to eat. Nights I'd keep the bathroom light on just to feel less alone. I thought my son would stay longer after the funeral. Maybe help me sort through the garage, or sit with me in the kitchen like we used to. But he was gone within 48 hours. That was when the calls started. Cold-clipped transactional. Hey, just checking in. Did the lawyer give you the paperwork? By the way, I noticed the car's still in the driveway. You're not really using it right. I can help you manage things better. Don't worry. I've got a plan. At first, I tried to see the best in him. Maybe he was trying to help. Maybe this was just his way of coping, turning grief into action. But deep down, I knew. I knew when he stopped asking how I was and only asked about the will, the property, the value of things. He wasn't being cruel, at least not intentionally. He was being efficient. He was being raised in a world that taught him to move fast and think practical. But he forgot something. He forgot I was the one who cleaned his scraped knees, who stayed up all night when he had fevers, who taught him how to tie his shoes and spell his name. He forgot I was more than just the woman left behind. I was the woman who held everything together while his father built a future for him. And more than that, he forgot what that car meant. Not just to me, but to his father. Inside that glove box was a letter. A letter my husband wrote before he died. Not to me, to our son. I never opened it. He sealed it with wax and told me, "When the time is right, give this to him. He needs to know." I kept it there because I didn't trust myself not to open it too soon. Because I wanted my son to find it on his own, to discover that his father saw more in him than just success and strategy. That letter. It was the last piece of his father's love, untouched by disappointment or distance. And now it's gone. Or maybe it isn't. Because something in me refuses to believe the story is over. The glove box was locked. My husband made sure of that. And the key, let's just say, it was never where my son thought to look. The day he sold the car, he didn't even look me in the eyes. He stood in the hallway, phone in hand, tapping something with his thumb. It's gone. he said, like he was giving a status update. Not a memory, not a goodbye, just logistics. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My heart beat so loudly I thought the walls would hear it. He went on something about a man who paid cash someone from out of town. Don't worry, Mum, he added like a bandage on a bullet wound. I got a good price. You weren't even driving it. He didn't see me gripping the kitchen counter. He didn't see the way my fingers trembled. Or maybe he did and thought it was just age. He didn't ask. He never does. What he saw was a widow standing in a quiet house with too much stuff and not enough use. What he didn't see was the woman who'd slept in hospital chairs, who'd wiped his father's brow during the last seizures, who'd listened to him whisper, "The Glovebox," when he's ready. What he didn't see was me. After he left, I sat on the living room floor, cross-legged like I used to when he was little, back when he'd beg me to build pillow forts. I tried to remember the last time we laughed together, or cried together. I couldn't. I thought about the car, about how many times I'd driven it with his father beside me, how many road trips, how many grocery runs, how many quiet moments in the parking lot of the hospital when I couldn't bring myself to go in yet, and the world felt too heavy. I thought about the letter, still locked in that glove box. I thought about how I had asked him gently once to wait, just a few more weeks. Let's decide together, I'd said. He nodded at the time, but I could see it in his eyes. His mind was already elsewhere. Plans, numbers, transactions. I wanted to believe it was just grief, that selling the car was some misguided way of moving forward, that he thought I needed to be unburdened. But deep down, I knew better. He had gone into the garage weeks earlier and taken other things too quietly. My husband's old watch, his set of tools, a photo from his military days. He didn't ask. He just took them, said they'd be safer at his place. And maybe they were. But they weren't his to take. Not yet. Not without a conversation. Not without kindness. It wasn't just about the car. It was about how he began treating me like the last box in the attic, something to be sorted, simplified, donated. He started calling less. When he did, it was always about what needed to be handled. Taxes, deeds, insurance. I started to dread the sound of my phone. Because I knew it wasn't going to be a "how are you," but a "have you signed?" Yet I watched him transform into a man who managed me, not loved me. A son who thought he knew better, who saw my silence as weakness instead of restraint. And the people around us, they didn't help. His wife, always with the tight smile and the calendar open. "We're just trying to help your mother stay on track." Her voice sugar-coated, but her eyes calculating. She suggested I move to a smaller place, a facility. Somewhere with support, she said. Wouldn't that be nice support? I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I never do. Instead, I sat through dinners where they spoke about me in third person right in front of me. She needs structure. She needs less to worry about. She doesn't drive much anyway. And always that condescending tone, the kind that makes you feel like a piece of furniture being moved across a floor plan. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was their project. That was when I realized they weren't just taking my things. They were taking my story. Erasing the years I'd lived, the things I'd survived, the sacrifices I never once asked them to repay. I looked at the photos still on the mantel, my husband holding our son as a baby. All those years ago, his cheeks, chubby eyes wide with trust. That child would have cried if he thought I was hurt. That child used to wrap his arms around my legs just because he didn't want me to leave the room. What happened to that boy? I wondered if somewhere along the way I taught him too well how to be strong, how to get things done, how to keep going no matter what. Maybe I made him believe that love was duty and grief was something to process. But I was done making excuses. They took my car. They took my voice. They took the space I once filled in their hearts. But they hadn't taken everything. Not yet. There were things they didn't know, things I had protected, quietly, carefully, like the safe deposit box, the one in my name only, or the bank account my husband opened years ago, not for emergencies, but for something else entirely. And most of all, they didn't know what else was hidden in that glove box beneath the letter. Because my husband didn't just leave words behind, he left proof. And that proof was about to change everything. There were days I stayed in bed just a little longer, not because I was tired, but because I couldn't bear the silence of the rest of the house. The kind of silence that didn't comfort it, accused. It asked, "Why are you still here?" What's left for you now? I started moving slower, speaking less. Not because of age, but because I didn't see the point anymore. The house that used to be filled with music, laughter voices, now echoed with empty space. No one dropped by. No one called just to check in. When my phone did ring, it was always for something to be signed, transferred, handed over. I stopped correcting them. I stopped asking for time. Every mom, "It's just easier this way," chipped away at something I used to hold firm. They made me feel like I was in the way, like I'd had my time and should step aside politely like a character in a play who'd said her lines and was now cluttering the stage. And the worst part, I started to believe them. I looked at myself in the mirror one morning, hair unbrushed, face, bare eyes, dull, and I didn't recognize the woman staring back. I used to be someone with plans, purpose, presence. I used to be someone needed. Now I was someone managed, scheduled, relocated. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with a brochure in front of me, someplace with bright carpets and neutral paintings and nurses with strained smiles. "It's just an option," they'd said, as if options didn't weigh heavier when spoken with gentle force. I stared at that glossy pamphlet for an hour. I imagined packing up this house, letting them divide everything, the furniture, the dishes, even the photo albums. I imagined standing in a room not my own, listening to someone knock before entering, asking if I'd like pudding. And for a moment, a very real, very terrifying moment, I almost said yes. Not out loud, but in my bones. I thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I am too tired to keep up. Maybe all of this is too big for one person to hold. Maybe letting go is easier. That thought sat with me for days. I stopped opening the curtains. I let dust gather on things I used to polish weekly. I avoided the garage entirely. I couldn't bring myself to look at the empty spot where the car used to be. Grief is strange. It doesn't come in waves like they say, it seeps in through cracks. It waits until you're alone with your thoughts. Then it whispers, "You don't matter anymore." I stopped cooking. What was the point? One bowl, one fork. I lived off toast and tea and excuses. When I did see people, neighbors, old friends, I smiled politely and said all the right things. "I'm doing fine. Just taking it easy. We're downsizing." They nodded, relieved not to ask more, grateful I didn't make them feel uncomfortable. No one saw the truth that I had folded myself smaller each day until I barely took up space at all. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a tiny ember refused to go out. One night I opened the drawer by the bed and found the envelope my husband had given me months before he died. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't been ready. But that night, with tears crusting at the corners of my eyes and my whole body aching from sadness, I did. Inside was a letter. Not dramatic, not long. Just his handwriting steady, sure. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye the way I wanted. I'm sorry for that. But know this, you are stronger than they'll ever understand. You always were. The car. It's not about the car. It's about what we built, what we protected, and what's still yours to finish. Don't let them take it. Don't fade. Not now. I held that letter like it was oxygen. I read it again and again. He hadn't meant it as a rescue. He knew I didn't need saving. He meant it as a reminder. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just sat very still and let the words settle inside me like roots. All this time I'd been waiting for someone to say, "I see you. I remember who you are." And there it was in ink, in his voice, in his belief in me. That's when something in me shifted. Just slightly. The next morning I brushed my hair. I made coffee and drank it by the window, not in the dark. I didn't feel whole yet, not even close. But I felt awake. That was the moment I stopped believing their story about me. I stopped letting their version of my usefulness define me. Yes, I had given them everything time, love, stability, but what I still had was mine. And I wasn't done yet. I didn't come back all at once. No dramatic return, no grand announcements, just small, quiet movements, each one deliberate. I began with the garage. They thought I'd avoid it forever. After all, that's where the car used to sit, the car he loved, the car they sold without asking. But one morning, I walked out there, still in my robe, barefoot, coffee in hand. The floor was bare, cold. But in the corner, tucked behind some boxes, I saw the small metal toolbox he used to keep polished, like it was part of his soul. I pulled it out, wiped the dust off the top. It wasn't heavy, but lifting it felt like carrying the weight of memory. Inside, everything was in place. The socket wrench still wrapped in cloth. The old flashlight with the fading beam. And underneath it all, the title. Not the car's title. Something else. It took me a few minutes to process what I was holding. A signed deed. His signature. My name. And next to it, a safe deposit box key. That's when I remembered. The glove box. I didn't tell them what I'd left in there. I didn't even remind them the car had a glove box at all. But before he passed, he made me promise one last promise to tuck that envelope inside. Just in case. The car might have been in his name, but what sat in the glove box was mine, legally, silently, fully. And now, they had no idea what they'd given away. I made calls, quiet ones, to banks, to attorneys, to someone he once trusted, who still remembered me, still called me Mom, even when I apologized for forgetting his name. The account hadn't been touched. The deposit box hadn't been opened. It had been flagged for access only with that exact key. Only by me. I booked an appointment, wore a plain coat, walked in like any other woman running an errand. Inside the box was paperwork, bank documents, share certificates, titles I didn't even understand. And on top a note in his handwriting. For when you need to remember what you're worth, not to them, to yourself. I didn't take everything out that day. I just sat there for a long time. No tears, no shaking. Just a quiet recognition I hadn't been left behind. I had been entrusted. That afternoon I made a second call, this time to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, an old friend. Someone from a life before children, before caretaking, swallowed everything. She picked up right away. I asked her about the non-profit she used to run. I asked if they still did outreach for women starting over. I said I might want to help, not with money necessarily, but time, experience. She laughed. You help. You built the blueprint. That night I pulled out my old journals, the ones I used to keep hidden in the back of the closet, notes from when I ran my own business, lists, proposals, plans. I read them like someone rediscovering a language she'd once spoken fluently. I didn't tell my son. Not yet. Let them think I was still grieving. Let them think I was fading quietly into the wallpaper, slipping out of relevance. Let them stay comfortable in their illusion. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. I started organizing. Not just the house, my mind, my finances, my memories. I called the insurance company. I updated the will. I moved assets into places they couldn't touch without going through me. Then I started walking every morning, not for fitness, for clarity. I walked past my neighbors' houses through the park by the bookstore where I used to take the kids. I let the past drift through me without anchoring me. One morning, I saw my son's wife at the grocery store. She smiled too quickly and reached for a different aisle. I let her. I didn't owe her anything. I think that unsettled her more than if I'd made a scene. Strength doesn't always sound like a roar. Sometimes it's the decision not to speak, not to explain, not to apologize for taking up space. When they sold that car, they thought they were erasing a piece of me. But what they didn't realize is that I never stored my power in the things they could take. I still had my mind, my resolve, and now I had proof that the life I'd built with my husband wasn't just sentimental, it was solid, documented, ours. I began working with the non-profit again, quietly, remotely. I helped draft grant proposals. I mentored younger women trying to restart after lost divorce betrayal. I used every scar, every overlooked moment as material. I didn't wear name tags. I didn't post photos. But in those Zoom calls, in those email threads, I felt alive again. No one clapped. No one said, "Look at what you've done." And I didn't need them to. I was moving, breathing, contributing, leading. I wasn't rebuilding my life. I was simply returning to it. The version of me they thought they buried. She never left. She was just waiting patiently for the world to get quiet enough to hear her voice again. It was a birthday party. Not mine. One of the grandkids, the youngest one, I think. I hadn't been invited at first. That didn't surprise me. But a week before the party, my daughter-in-law called. "Do you want to come by next Saturday?" Her voice was tight, practiced. "It's just cake and presents." I said, "Sure." No emotion, no hesitation, just sure. I didn't dress up. I wore the same old cardigan they always rolled their eyes at. No makeup, no jewelry, just my wedding band and a small pin on my collar, the kind no one notices unless they know. When I arrived, the house was full. Neighbors, other kids, relatives I barely recognized anymore. Music, laughter, and that fake cheerfulness people use when they see someone they think they've already written off. My son gave me a stiff hug. "Glad you could make it, Mum." I nodded. His wife barely looked at me. She was handing out plastic forks, her smile stretched too thin. The kids were playing in the backyard. I walked out to watch them. The sun was warm, the kind of warmth that sinks into your skin, soft and slow. Then someone called out, "Hey, is that her?" I turned. A man was standing by the patio door. I recognized him barely. He used to work for the bank, the same one my husband had dealt with. Older now, thinner. He stepped forward, eyes narrowing as he looked at me. "Ma'am?" he said suddenly, and then paused. "Excuse me, Commander, is that you? Everything stopped?" The word echoed, "Commander." My son turned from the grill. His wife dropped a plate. Someone laughed nervously. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. The man stepped closer. "It's been years. I didn't know you were back." I looked at him, calm. "Just visiting family," I said. He blinked. "Still consulting. We've got new hires who quote your reports like gospel." I could feel the eyes on me now, from all directions. My son's hand hovered over the barbecue tongs, like he didn't know what to do with them anymore. I shrugged. "I keep busy?" He chuckled. "You always did. It's good to see you again." Then he nodded, almost like a salute. Not theatrical, just instinctive. A flicker of the old respect. He walked away, and no one said a word. The silence that followed felt different this time. Not awkward, not dismissive. It was stunned. My son opened his mouth, closed it again. His wife stared at me like she'd just found a stranger living in her guest room. I turned back to the kids. They were laughing, chasing bubbles, completely unaware. That was the moment. Not a speech, not a confrontation. Just that. Recognition not from the ones who dismissed me, but from someone who knew. And I hadn't said a thing. I didn't need to. Let them put it together. Let them realize they'd sold my car, thinking it was just a machine, not knowing it held keys to a life they never bothered to ask about. Let them feel the weight of everything they assumed, unraveling. I stayed a little longer, long enough to help cut the cake to hand a napkin to the youngest when he dropped his slice. I smiled at the kids, listened to their nonsense stories, kissed their sticky cheeks. But I didn't stay for coffee. I left quietly. No goodbye. I didn't look back when I shut the gate behind me, and still they watched. Because once someone sees you for real, they can't unsee it. And I had no interest in shrinking back into their version of me. They finally saw me. Not because I raised my voice, but because I didn't have to. It's been a few years now. I don't keep track of birthdays anymore. Not theirs. Not even mine. The calendar still hangs by the fridge, but the squares are mostly blank. And I'm fine with that. My days are quiet. I like them that way. I wake up early, feed the birds, brew one strong cup of black coffee, the kind he used to make back when the house still felt full. Sometimes I take out the old notebooks, the ones with his handwriting in the margins, the ones they never knew existed. I sit by the window and read. Not because I miss him more in those moments, but because it reminds me who I still am. The car. The one they sold, I let it go. They thought they were doing me a favor, selling off what they saw as a piece of junk, just a dusty old station wagon from the 80s. What they didn't know, what they never asked, is what was inside. The Glovebox had a letter. One single letter. My husband's handwriting. To be opened only if I'm gone first. It was folded neatly. His words were brief. He wrote about the safe deposit box, the assets, the people who owed him favors, the people who owed me. And he ended it with one line. You were always the stronger one. Let them find out in their own time. I didn't cry when I read it. I didn't feel angry. I just nodded. It felt like him exactly as I remembered. Understated, steady, faithful. And so I let the car go. Let them sell it. Let them assume it was worthless. Because they'd never think to ask what a glove box could hold. They've been more polite since that party. Not warmer, just more careful. They send invitations now to holidays, dinners, school events. I go sometimes. Not because I need to, but because I want the grandkids to see me, to know some part of their story. But I don't stay long. I don't stay late. And when I leave, I don't wait for hugs. I walk out with my shoulders straight, my keys in hand, my silence intact. I've rebuilt quietly. I do work again, not full-time, but enough to keep the mind sharp. I mentor from a distance. A few calls each month, some contracts, some advice. They listen. They always listen. And when I see my reflection these days, I don't flinch. I don't apologize. The woman in the mirror doesn't look like someone who needs permission to exist. She looks like someone who no longer explains herself. There was a time I thought I'd lost everything, the love, the respect, the voice I used to have. But none of it was gone. It was only buried, covered by noise and assumption and smallness. They tried to shrink me. I chose to expand in silence. No applause, no spotlights, no performances, just presence. And here's the truth I hold closest now, when they wouldn't give me a seat at their table. I built my own command, not out of spite, not out of vengeance, but because I finally realized I never needed their invitation. I was always enough. And now they know it too, even if they'll never say it out loud.